The night air was thick with the stench of gasoline and damp asphalt as Walter Briggs stepped out of the corner store, a plastic bag of groceries swinging lightly from his grip. He adjusted the sleeves of his worn-out jacket, his gray hair slightly disheveled from the cold wind rolling in from the city streets. It had been a simple errand, just bread, milk, and a pack of cigarettes. He probably shouldn't be smoking at his age. But the second he stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, he felt it, the eyes on him. He didn't react, didn't turn his head. That was the first rule of survival. Don't let them know you see them before you need to. Instead, he walked at the same steady pace, his boots scuffing the pavement, his posture loose but controlled. Behind him, footsteps followed. 3 sets. They weren't in a rush. No, they were testing him, seeing if he'd panic, if he'd start walking faster. Walter smirked slightly. Wrong move, boys. He'd seen this game play out 100 times before, but usually in places far worse than this run-down city street. Kandahar, Mogadishu, Bogota. Places where the men following him hadn't just been reckless kids looking for an easy mark. They'd been trained killers, and they hadn't fared much better. He kept walking, hands in his jacket pockets, pretending not to notice the shadows that grew closer. The alley leading toward his apartment complex was just ahead. A narrow corridor of graffiti-covered brick, dimly lit by a single flickering street lamp. A perfect place for an ambush. And they thought they had the upper hand. He heard them whispering now, cocky, arrogant. One of them let out a quiet chuckle, like they were sharing a joke at his expense. Then, just as Walter stepped past the alley entrance, they moved. A kid barely out of his teens stepped in front of Walter, blocking his path with a fake friendly grin. He was lanky, wearing a cheap leather jacket with a knife tucked into his waistband. His friend, a stockier guy with a shaved head, hovered behind Walter's shoulder. "Hey, old man, you got a minute?" Walter stopped, cocking an eyebrow. "Not really." Shaved head chuckled, stepping closer. "Too close." "Come on now, don't be rude. We were just wondering if you had some cash to spare." Walter sighed. There it was. The setup was so sloppy, so predictable. It almost offended him. He glanced past them, noting the third guy who had crept further behind him, leaning casually against the alley wall. A lookout, maybe. "Just my pension money, boys," Walter said casually, shifting his grip on the grocery bag. Scarface? Because now that Walter got a good look, he noticed a long, jagged scar running from the kid's jaw to his cheekbone, grinned wider. "Yeah? Well, maybe we should hold on to it for you. Make sure no one else takes it." Walter exhaled slowly. If only these kids had a clue. Scarface took one step closer, his fingers drifting toward the knife at his belt. "Come on, old-timer, hand it over." And that was it. The moment Walter had been waiting for. The moment they lost. Walter moved. Faster than their eyes could track, his hand shot out, catching Scarface's wrist before it even reached the knife. The kid gasped, eyes bulging as Walter twisted his arm, bending it at an angle joints weren't meant to go. A sickening pop. Scarface screamed, dropping to one knee as his friends took a half-second too long to process what had just happened. A half-second was all Walter needed. With a sharp pivot of his heel, he threw a brutal elbow into Shaved Head's face, feeling the crunch of cartilage as his nose exploded in blood. The third guy, the lookout, was already scrambling backward, eyes wide in panic. "Yo, what the fu—" Walter didn't give him time to react. One smooth motion. He hooked his foot around Scarface's ankle and swept his legs out from under him. The kid hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Shaved Head stumbled backward, clutching his broken nose. "Jesus Christ! What the hell was that?" Walter straightened, adjusting his jacket. That was just me warming up. The lookout was already running. He wasn't getting paid enough for this. Scarface clutched his dislocated shoulder, gritting his teeth. What the hell are you?" Walter crouched down, looking him right in the eye. "The last guy you should have picked a fight with." Shaved Head, still staggering, gasped out. Who are you?" Walter chuckled. "Ever hear of Briggs?" Scarface went white. No fucking way. Walter tilted his head. "Yeah, that Briggs." They had heard the name. Special Forces, Green Berets, a man who had spent decades in war zones doing things these kids couldn't even begin to understand. And they had just tried to rob him. Shaved Head looked like he was going to pass out. Scarface? He was too busy trying to crawl backward. Walter sighed, shaking his head. You know, if you boys put this kind of effort into real work, maybe you wouldn't be out here making dumb mistakes. Scarface gulped, his bravado completely gone. We didn't know, man. We thought... Walter raised a hand. I don't care what you thought. I care that you learn. The kid nodded so fast it looked painful. Walter stood, adjusting his jacket one last time. Now... He gestured toward the alley entrance. I suggest you take what's left of your dignity and get the hell out of my sight. They didn't need to be told twice. Scarface scrambled to his feet, grabbing his bleeding friend. They stumbled out of the alley, limping away into the night. And Walter? He picked up his grocery bag, dusted himself off, and kept walking, like nothing had happened. Because for a man like him, this was just another night. They thought he was just an old man. They were dead wrong. Walter Briggs watched them run, their footsteps echoing down the alleyway, their curses fading into the night. Pathetic. For all their swagger and tough talk, the moment things got real, they folded like damp paper. He shook his head and kept walking, adjusting his grip on his grocery bag. But something inside him stirred. It wasn't rage. He had left that part of himself behind long ago. It wasn't even resentment. It was something deeper, something closer to disappointment. Because he had seen too many young men go down this path, and he had buried too many of them. Walter had every reason to let it go, but he couldn't. Because these weren't just punk kids looking for beer money. This was a street crew, small time but growing, known for picking off easy prey in this part of the city. A week ago, he had heard about an old woman getting mugged outside a laundromat. Last month, a veteran, an actual Vietnam vet, pushing 80, got beaten so bad he ended up in the hospital. And now these idiots thought they could shake down another helpless old man. Walter clenched his jaw. Time to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. Walter didn't head home. Instead, he cut through the side streets, moving with the kind of effortless precision that came from a lifetime of navigating hostile environments. He knew where they'd run to. He had seen their type before. They were too cocky to lie low. They'd go right back to their little corner, thinking the worst was over. They were wrong. He found them in a parking lot behind an abandoned gas station, sitting on the hood of a rusted-out sedan, licking their wounds and talking shite. Scarface was still cradling his arm, his shoulder hanging at an awkward angle. Shaved Head had stuffed tissues up his broken nose, still sniffling. The third guy, the one who ran, was pacing, nervous. Walter smiled to himself. Time for round 2, boys. Walter didn't sneak up on them, didn't need to. He walked straight into the parking lot, his boots crunching against the pavement. The moment they saw him, Scarface's face drained of color. Number, no way. Walter kept walking, casual, controlled, like he had all the time in the world. Shaved Head stumbled backward, his voice cracking. What the hell, man? We left. We're done. Walter tilted his head. Number, you ran. That's different. Scarface gritted his teeth. What do you want? You got your punches in, man. We get it. Walter exhaled. You don't get it, not yet. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it made the three of them flinch. He stepped closer. You think this is a game? The third kid, the one who ran, gulped. We were just messing around, man. We didn't know who you were. Walter nodded. You didn't know, but now you do. Walter reached into his jacket pocket. The three punks tensed. Shaved Head half raised his fists, like he thought Walter was pulling a gun. But Walter didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a single folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the hood of their car. Scarface stared at it. What the hell is that? Walter crossed his arms. That's a list! The kid hesitated. Then, with his uninjured arm, he picked it up. His eyes scanned the names, and then they widened. What is this? Walter's expression didn't change. That's every person you and your crew have ever robbed in this neighborhood. Shaved Head blinked. How the fuck do you know that? Walter shrugged. I've been around. I listen. Unlike you, I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room. Scarface's hands shook as he gripped the paper. Walter stepped closer. Here's the deal, boys. His voice was low, deliberate. You're gonna make this right. Shaved Head scoffed. Yeah? And what if we don't? Walter leaned in, his gaze turning ice cold. "Then you'll wish the only thing I did to you was what I did in that alley." Silence. Pure, thick, suffocating silence. The third kid, the one who ran, broke first. "Oh, okay, man, okay, what do we do?" Walter smirked. "You start paying people back. You take care of the people you hurt. And you keep your damn hands off the elderly." Scarface swallowed. "And if we don't?" Walter chuckled. "Then I come back, and next time, I won't be alone." The three of them visibly stiffened, because they knew what that meant. There were more like him out there, and they did not want to meet them. Walter let the silence hang between them for a few more seconds. Then he turned and walked away, hands back in his pockets. He didn't need to say anything else, didn't need to look back, because he knew. They'd be different men tomorrow, some lessons hurt, and some you never forget. The next morning, Walter sat on his small apartment balcony, sipping his coffee, watching the city wake up. It had been a long time since he had been in a war zone, and yet somehow, the fight always seemed to find him. But this time, maybe, just maybe, he had made a difference. A small one. But sometimes, that's all it takes. Walter smirked to himself, shaking his head. "Damn kids." And with that, he took another sip of coffee and enjoyed the morning.